Let's dive right into this explainer of Benjamin Jowett's translation of Plato's Protagoras. Now, if you think this is just going to be some dry, dusty philosophical treatise, think again. We're going to frame this as a highly dramatic, honestly pretty comedic, 5-act search for the true nature of virtue. It is packed with irony and features some of the absolute sharpest intellectual sparring of the ancient world.
We'll be tracing this incredible dialectical journey today through a classic 5-part theatrical structure. We'll start with how the stage is set, move into the debate on teaching civic virtue, take a quick detour through the Simonides poem, tackle the hedonistic calculus, and wrap up with a massive dramatic irony.
So, Act 1. The stage is set. Pre-dawn zeal and intellectual markets.
We kick things off with this frenetic, almost slapstick awakening. Picture this. An overly zealous young guy named Hippocrates is literally banging on Socrates' door with his staff long before the sun is even up. He rushes in, completely desperate because the wildly famous sophist, Protagoras, has just arrived in town. It's an intellectual gold rush, and Hippocrates wants to buy his wares of knowledge right this second. But Socrates, being Socrates, immediately steps in to pump the brakes.
What's really fascinating here is the warning Socrates gives his young friend about the unique danger of just blindly buying into sophistic teaching. He makes this brilliant comparison. He says, look, if you buy food for the body at the market, you can carry it home in a jar, right? You can have a physician check if it's actually safe before you consume it. But food for the soul, things like teachings and doctrines, you can't carry those in a separate vessel. The moment you buy them, they are deposited directly into your soul. You're either instantly harmed or benefited. So you absolutely need a physician of the soul to evaluate them first.
That warning sets us up for the satirical intellectual marketplace at the wealthy house of Callias. Plato paints this hilarious, highly theatrical picture of the guest sophists making their entrances. You've got Protagoras pacing back and forth with his synchronized entourage parting like the Red Sea every time he turns around. Then there's Hippias sitting ex cathedra on a chair of state like a king, just dispensing astronomical trivia. And my personal favorite, Prodicus, who is practically buried in sheepskins in a converted storage closet, his deep voice booming so loudly in the small room that it echoes into complete unintelligible noise. It's just a masterful comedic setup.
Which brings us to Act 2. Teaching civic virtue. Can phronesis be bought? This grand staging naturally builds into the central debate. Protagoras boldly steps up and claims he can teach prudence, or phronesis, and literally make men better citizens day by day through the art of politics. Well, Socrates immediately hits him with a double objection. First, he points out that while the Athenian assembly relies on actual experts for things like shipbuilding, they let literally any citizen, a tinker, a cobbler, whoever, advise on state matters. That implies civic virtue isn't some specialized, teachable art. Second, if it could be taught, why do legendary statesmen like Pericles end up with sons who are honestly complete political duds?
Now, Protagoras is a master rhetorician for a reason, and he counters this with his captivating great myth. He tells the story of Epimetheus, who gave out all the survival traits, claws, fur, wings, to the animals, but completely forgot about mankind, leaving us naked and defenseless. Prometheus tries to save us by stealing fire, but even then, humans couldn't live together without destroying one another. We lacked political wisdom. So Zeus intervenes. He sends Hermes to impart eidos, reverence, and dike, justice, not just to a select specialized few, but to all men. This is Protagoras' brilliant way of explaining why Athens lets the cobbler speak. Basic political virtue is a universal human baseline.
But he doesn't just leave it at myth. He pivots straight into pure logic, delivering one of antiquity's most profound arguments on rational punishment. He points out that we don't punish people for being born small or weak, right? That's just nature. We only punish people for things they could have changed through study, exercise, and teaching. So the very fact that society uses preventative punishment for injustice proves we inherently believe virtue is a teachable, learnable skill.
And to answer Socrates' second objection, why great fathers sometimes have terrible sons, Protagoras drops this fantastic flute player analogy. He says, imagine a society where literally everyone plays the flute and teaches it constantly. The son of a master flute player might just lack natural talent and end up being pretty mediocre compared to his dad. But if you compared that mediocre son to a total savage who had never even seen a flute, he'd look like a virtuoso. Protagoras is arguing that the sheer omnipresence of civic education in society masks how much virtue is actually being taught.
All right, Act 3, the Simonides poem interlude, a comedic semantic detour.
Just as Socrates starts turning up the heat in the debate,
Protagoras gets a little ruffled and suddenly shifts the entire battlefield to literary criticism. He tries to trap Socrates in a contradiction, using a poem by Simonides of Chios. In one line, the poet says, "Hard is it to become good." But later on, that same poet attacks someone else for saying, "Hard is it to be good." Protagoras is basically asking, "Gotcha, how can the poet say it's hard to become good, but then get angry at another guy for saying it's hard to be good?"
To rescue the poet from this contradiction, Socrates forces an incredibly precise semantic distinction into the text. He draws a hard line between genethai, which means the active, really difficult process of becoming good, and enai, which is the static state of being good. Socrates argues that Simonides meant, while a human can certainly struggle to become good, maintaining that perfect, unchanging state of being good, that's impossible. That's a trait only the gods possess.
But Socrates doesn't just give an earnest literary analysis here. He uses this whole interlude to hilariously parody the sophist's hypercritical way of interpreting things. He drags poor Protagoras into the argument, using Protagoras' own famous method of splitting synonyms to ironically claim that in the obscure Celian dialect, the word hard, chalopon, actually translates to evil. It's a completely facetious joke, meant to show that if you hide behind the authority of poets instead of using original dialectic, you can twist language to mean absolutely anything you want.
Now we hit the philosophical core in Act 4, hedonistic calculus and virtue, the unity of arete.
Socrates steers them back to the main point and corners Protagoras with a massive structural question about virtue or arete. He asks, are the virtues, things like justice, temperance, holiness, and courage, are they like the parts of a face, meaning like eyes, nose, and mouth, where each has a totally distinct function, or are they like pieces of gold, where there's only one underlying substance and they just differ in size and amount? Protagoras really wants them to be distinct, especially courage.
To prove that virtue is actually singular, Socrates brilliantly introduces the hedonistic calculus. He asks, do people really knowingly choose to do evil just because they are overcome by pleasure? He argues no, absolutely not. Immediate pleasure looks massive to us because it's right in front of our faces, while long-term pain looks tiny due to the illusion of distance and time. So choosing the wrong path isn't some moral failure of willpower, it is strictly a failure of measurement. It's an ignorance of metretke techne, the art of measurement.
By proving that choosing evil is basically just an optical illusion of distance, Socrates completely dismantles Protagoras' last stronghold, which was courage. Think about it. If bad choices are just ignorance, then cowardice is just a wildly inaccurate estimate of pleasure, pain, and honor. Therefore, courage isn't some innate, chest-thumping trait. It is simply the knowledge of what is and is not truly terrible. The virtues aren't separate parts of a face at all. They all boil down to one single thing: knowledge.
Which brings us to our grand finale, Act 5, the grand dramatic irony, a Socratic role reversal.
As the dust settles on this debate, we witness this magnificent, complete flip of philosophical positions. Look at this grand, dramatic irony. Socrates started the day flatly denying that virtue could be taught, but by the end, he's reduced all virtue to a science of measurement, proving that virtue is entirely knowledge, and what is more teachable than knowledge? Meanwhile, Protagoras, the guy who literally charges a fortune claiming to teach virtue, spent the whole second half of the debate fighting tooth and nail to prove that courage is instinctual and completely distinct from pure knowledge. The force of the argument literally spun them both 180 degrees.
As Benjamin Jowett points out in his introduction, this isn't just a clever, logical game Plato is playing. This profound impasse at the end of the dialogue is designed to push us out of our comfortable boundaries. We are being forced to leave behind this old, fragmented, conventional morality and move toward a unified, transcendent framework of ethics, where doing the right thing and knowing the right thing are completely inseparable.
So, we want to leave you with this final, provocative thought from today's explainer. If virtue truly is just a unified science of measurement, a literal art of weighing the future against the present, is our failure to act morally nothing more than an optical illusion of the soul? Does true evil even exist, or is it just profound, tragic ignorance? It's a question that makes Plato just as mind-bending today as he was thousands of years ago,